I want to bring Martin George in to weigh in on the development. So many. The union boss, I was talking to Gary Griffith earlier on, and the union boss, that's the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Social and Welfare Association head, ASP, Gideon Dixon, says, plain talk, bad manners. He says, stop playing politics with the TTPS. And there are many who, looking at the development from different lens, those who understand the opposition's position on wanting to bring the names to the parliament, wanting to ventilate and to have that debate concerning who's going up. Then there are others who are suggesting, hey, if you bypass that, you can really bring someone who's holding a party card and just put them straight into the office, which is supposed to be independent. And you could now pull strings from the back end and basically influence the TTPS. Martin, I want to say thanks for the time. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to your perspective. This particular development, are you surprised by the opposition's position on the matter last Friday?
The thing is, not surprised at all, Jason, because at the end of the day, the way we have practiced politics in Trinidad and Tobago has been in this acrimonious, counterculture, whereby we oppose things sometimes, even just for opposing's sake. And particularly where you have that power to determine, well, look, if there's a special majority vote that requires opposition support, we have seen in many cases politicians in Trinidad and Tobago exercise that power in a way just to say, well, look, I have you to have, basically. You're not going to get my support simply because I have the power now to be able to deny you. Now, the thing is, in relation to this incident and what occurred in the parliament, I'm not necessarily saying that's the situation, because some of the points that were raised by the opposition were the question as to the length of the acting appointments. Now, the reality is, Jason, I think that, if it is that we do ever achieve some meaningful and realistic constitutional reform, one of the things that needs to be overhauled entirely is the entire selection process for the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. Because in Trinidad and Tobago at present, it's easier to appoint a president, it's easier to appoint a chief justice, it's easier to appoint a prime minister than it is to appoint a commissioner.
And let me ask, because you were a former member of that particular commission, the Police Service Commission. From your experience, what's the biggest hindrance? What's the greatest spoke in that particular wheel that, as you put it, making it difficult to appoint a commissioner compared to, let's say, a president and other top brass positions in the country?
Well, the legislative requirements are so cumbersome. And then it requires, remember, you have to send this list to the president, and then the president has to then send it on to the parliament, and then the parliament has to put it on the list for debate, and then you have the debate back and forth amongst the parliamentarians. So, it is an unnecessarily cumbersome process, and most civilized countries in the world do not have such a process. And yet they are able to appoint commissioners of police in their countries. So we need to look at that fundamentally.
So is the opposition correct in calling for more transparency and accountability? Because Dr. Munilal on page 6, he says, and I want to say, quote, "We have no problem coming here," meaning the House, "receiving the names and having a short debate on the names." Yeah, he's saying that, the old way would have allowed for transparency and, they want to have discourse. Bring the names, let's talk about it. But and he's saying it's a short process. You're telling me otherwise?
No. The thing is, what we're saying is that if it is that you are talking about the normal process for the substantive appointments, that is what is the long, cumbersome process, because you're talking about having to create the merit list, having to do those interviews, etc. So if it is that you are talking about pulling persons specifically from the merit list And I think that is one of the issues that the opposition raised. They asked, look, can you confirm for sure that, in other words, it's going to be the next person on the merit list who is going to be the person who is going to be appointed as the acting commissioner in such a circumstance where you want to short-circuit the parliamentary process? And I think it's a valid question that was raised in that regard. So if it is that's the situation, then you may be able to say, well, look, yes, we can rest assured that, look, this person has been screened, vetted, and stuff like that. What the opposition raised a red flag about is the possibility of someone who's not on the merit list being put in that acting appointed position, and you don't have the parliamentary oversight.
So I would imagine here that the government will, of course, with the AG spearheading this particular move, I would imagine their approach is to make the process easier, is to make it a little more, make the wheels turn a bit faster. At what point in terms of presenting the argument did they, would you say, probably miss the target? Well, it's either you say, look, for this acting appointment, we are putting a sunset time. In other words, it can be no more than 2 weeks or 1 week, if you say. So therefore you say, well, look, in an urgent circumstance, we don't have to go through this whole thing of laying it in Parliament, interrupting the parliamentary schedule, etc., to say, well, look, we're debating this. We can say, look, the acting appointment for 7 days or 10 days or 14 days can be done without coming to the Parliament. And that, I think, might be a way of looking at limiting the excesses or the fears or concerns that persons may have that there can be an abuse of the power. Let me ask, do you think all this the administrative gymnastics and all the theater that takes place within the parliament with the selection of a top cop, the back and forth, the bacchanal, for want of a better word, we would have seen with former Commissioner Gary Griffith, what's happening now with the current commissioner, with her reaching retirement age and getting this extension and all that's happening? Is there a correlation between some of what we're seeing there and, I guess, the kind of brazen and unwarranted and truly heartbreaking acts of crime? And I mean, I'm not suggesting here probably the bandit element or the criminal elements sit down, probably reading and staying on top of the news, but I'm sure it trickles down. I'm sure at some point they're able to realize that the top brass back and forth are sort of pulling and tugging. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a correlation between all what's happening and just the general confidence of the TTPS and what we're seeing as it pertains to crime and the cause and effect on the ground.
I'm not sure that the criminal element necessarily would take the time to peruse Hansard or the proceedings of Parliament in this way. But you have to recognize that generally for the population, it does not inspire confidence if it is that you have this sort of, as you say, the to-in and fro-in and the pulling and tugging on the appointment of who is going to even act as your commissioner of police. So we need really to look at it from a fundamental perspective where if it is that we're talking constitutional reform, then this is one of the things that needs to be changed as of yesterday. It is urgent for this to be changed. We also need to remember, Jason, when someone is acting as Commissioner of Police, you are imbued with the full powers of the office of Commissioner. So there's nothing to say that, look, because you're an acting commissioner, you can't do anything or you can't function. Remember, former acting commissioner Stephen Williams, he acted for several long stints. And on each occasion when he acted, he did have the full powers of the office of Commissioner of Police.
The reason I'm asking this, and you're correct, I mean, obviously the criminal element won't be going through the Hansard and going through the nitty-gritty of developments via the news cycle. But I'm thinking here, when we look at the commissioners of the past, the commissioners that people hold in high esteem from the Kojak man. Was the Kojak man back in the day again, Martin? Burroughs, right, Burroughs.
Down to the toothless bulldog.
Right, Burroughs. Burroughs, people like Philbert right, from Point Fortin. These were commissioners, were gun in hand in the bush on a raid. And Gary, in a way, followed in that particular example, an Action Cup, Action Jackson kind of commissioner. So coming out of that, and again, not knocking the current commissioner, she came from a different backing, you know, more administrative. So I guess she's approaching it from that perspective. But I'm thinking here, the top cop position is a very important position, and it's one that, if you get it correct, it could bring some, or at least the messaging to those who are bent on crime. They will recognize, okay, it's like a strict principle.
Yes, you're
as opposed to
something there.
Yes, like a strict principle. Like, you know, students in a school know that you see the one that principle there. Ooh, yeah, that one different, as opposed to someone who might be a little more relaxed. So based on that, the nominations.
A classic example, Jason. Let me give you a classic example, and I'm using one outside of Trinidad and Tobago so people could understand that, you know, we're not mired in the local politics. Think of Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani in New York, yeah.
New York, right, as mayor, right? Yeah. Think of how he approached things, and that made a difference. So the leadership from the top can set the tone, which can then determine how others are going to follow. And if there isn't that clear, distinct element of the leader from the top saying, hey, listen, get your act together. In other words, and this is to the rank and file of the police service. So in other words, you as leader need to show, hey, I'm not only leading from the front, but I am whipping my troops into shape. And anybody who steps out of line, I will deal with them. And you need to have that firm hand on the wheel, because we see every day in the newspapers, Jason, police officers being charged for criminal offenses, some of them being convicted for criminal offenses, if you understand me. So there is that element within the police service that continues in this manner unabated. So if you as leader do not show that strength and determination, and you show that, look, hey, I am going to make a difference, then I think definitely that is a signal the criminal element will look at and think, well, you know, it's business as usual, because we are not really facing any major opposition. Well, right? So it's something that we have to consider in terms of the optics of it.
Of course, the optics and the person who's now in the seat. Now, I want to tell you, it's no secret, it's public knowledge. Their nominations are out. I know there would have been an extension. So in that regard, do you believe that they will continue with, let's say, an extension of the extension for the current top cop? Or is there space, or is it time for us to look at a new candidate? And if indeed it's the time, how soon could we probably see a new confirmed top cop? Not no acting business. We're talking here top cop. You have the work, go forward and shake the place.
Well, I mean, it may seem, if one were to read the tea leaves, it may seem that an extension of an extension, as you put it, might be what is being thought of. But in terms of a substantive nominee, one would imagine that the Police Service Commission is already, you know, doing its work, doing its screening, doing its interviews, would already have its short list, would already have its merit list of persons whom they would want to put forth as nominees. So I don't imagine that if it is that the government signals that, look, hey, we will not be granting an extension, that the Police Service Commission is then going to say, well, okay, we're now going to start, you know? So they should have their ducks in a row and have everything in order, so that if it is the government says, look, no extension, you have your list ready to be able to submit.
You know, as we go forward, and I just want to probably give you a chance to put some closing remarks. I really hope and trust that obviously the powers that be on both sides of the divide at some point could really have common ground, so that going forward we could really have a more, well, I guess, a smooth process. Because I've found in my looking at this, my time here as a Trinbagonian, as a citizen, we've always been back and forth with the top cop position. I remember the time we brought some Canadians and all to to hold the position, and people were up in arms. And then there were those who were saying, well, you know, let's get some men from outside because they have no friends, they have no bias, there's no particular connection. And even these guys, I don't really find they really shake the cage. So at what point, you know, would we really get this together?
Yeah, that was Wade and Gretzky.
Yeah, I remember.
They eventually got very comfortable.
Listen, I went down to take my mom for a birthday breakfast. These men having coffee by Don Shagaramas by small cruising. And I'm saying, but these men supposed to be working.
It was a paid vacation for them. And, you know, I mean, because I was on the inside, I was able to recognize and see that from where they came from, those two gentlemen were enjoying a standard and quality of living here in Trinidad and Tobago that they could never have even dreamed of in their wildest imaginings. So, you know, they really had quite a nice paid vacation here during that time, you know, in that position.
So, Martin, as far as I'm concerned, you know, that we have missed the mark so many times, and I really hope that we're able to get it together and, you know, really change the tone and get the message. I've always said it right here on the program, for those who look on, every single time when I see something that's heartbreaking, I talk about messaging and being able to have someone who could really speak firm and speak directly to the elements to let them know, hey, enough is enough.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Because the point is, there's the cry from the public. You know, you look at that new song that was released, you know, by these artists, local artists. You know, basically, they are echoing the cries of the nation.
The call.
You know?
The call.
Yeah, they're echoing the call of the nation. You know, so therefore, you ask yourself, why is it our politicians, our leaders, those who are in the parliament, are not responding in a mature, sensible, and responsible manner? So if it is that you need to tweak this bill, you need to make adjustments, then let them get together behind the scenes, make the adjustments and say, okay, yes, we could agree to that, you change this, and then you come back to Parliament and say, okay, look, we've gotten something, let's pass this for the progress of the nation. And that's what we need, Jason. We need persons in our Parliament who are looking out for the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago, not persons who are looking out for their own party's interests or their own political interest. And that's the challenge we face on a daily basis here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, country first. As we wrap things up, Martin, you have the final say. Go right ahead.
Yeah, no, what I would like to say to, you know, Trinidad and Tobago is that, look, we need to continue to call upon our leaders and our politicians to start focusing on us as the citizens and our needs, and to stop the games and the shenanigans which occur in the Parliament with the name calling, the finger pointing. It's so childish and puerile that it really does no justice to the roles and functions for which they were elected or appointed to serve in those hallowed halls of Parliament.
Martin George, all the best. Thanks for coming on, and we'll touch base soon, God spare.
Always a pleasure. Have a great morning.
The show continues after the break.